You know, some of the best quarters of footy ever played are found buried deep here in the archives of the AFL. And the best of what's in here is now on video. It's fabulous footy flashbacks. 3 unbeatable quarters of footy action. And most of this stuff hasn't been seen since it was played. These are the quarters that shaped your club. Now you can relive them over and over again. Fabulous Footy Flashbacks Series 2. 5 new videos, 3 fabulous quarters on each. Of course, this is the stuff that made the legends.
There is about the game of football something that touches every beating heart. And there is something for every Australian man, woman and child in this living video history. 100 years of Australian football on video. It's yours to keep forever at these stores now.
To present the Premiership Cup. Right hard to present it to number 26, the captain, Mark Bickely.
You're 19, you're having a tremendous season at the moment. Any aspirations about playing league football?
Oh yeah, you know, I want to go down sometime, but when it is, I don't really know yet.
Just on behalf of the Adelaide Football Club, commiserations to North Melbourne. They put up a great fight. And just thank you to everyone who travelled across and supported us. It was just magnificent. Thank you!
Hi, I'm Mark Bickely and I'm captain of the Adelaide Football Club.
You don't walk away from a Bickley game and say, whew, that was fantastic. That's not how he plays. I would remember a smother, or I would remember a chase down, or I remember a body commitment that would be there. Those are the memories that sit in my game. Spectators, our fans would walk away, and I don't think you'd go into the bar and say, gee, oh, what about that mark of Bickley's, or what about that goal? It's not his cup of tea.
Couch goes back, well shepherded by McGrath, strong tackle by Bickley. He's done a very good job on Couch, all things considered.
We talk football, you know, over every meal, and of course everywhere we went I used to take him into work every day, and everything was football, everything we talked about. But the main thing is that I always stressed on him, that if you just go in hard for the ball, you know, there's a good chance you don't get hurt. You've got to be in there hard at it, and that's the sort of player he is, you know.
McCartney goes to ground. Bickley with courage again, kicking in danger. Bickley's been cleaned up pretty badly.
Sum him up. Good, honest, basic, genuine, but straight shooting. You know, just a good, honest bloke. Someone that you can have a beer with, have a laugh with, but you like him in your trenches when you go into battle with him as well, which is pretty handy.
Winston, and he does. Kicking inside 50. Hard with the block, but Bickley cut across. Strong play.
I think any other captain looking at Mark would love to have his position and have 2 premierships under their belt. I look at some of the other teams lower in the ladder. I think their captains would envy the position Mark holds. If there has been some tough times, I think they're washed away with the good times that we've had.
Every good side has a good captain. Mark Bickely. Bicks. Millions of people all over the world watching the telecast, Mark, watching you at the end of the game, holding up the Premiership Cup. It's certainly a privileged position to be in, and you think over 100 years only probably 100 blokes ever get to do that, so I feel very honoured to represent the guys that actually won the game for us yesterday. It was just a magnificent feeling.
Oh, he was a cheeky child, and he and his brother were very competitive. Didn't matter from the time they were awake till the time they went to bed. They competed in every single thing that they did, and they had friends that were the same, and everything they did was like they were either the Australian Test team or the like they played football, they were either AFL stars. They could never be anybody just ordinary. They all had big ideas, as little as what they were. And I used to get into his scrapes, and sometimes I'd have to get the feather duster and chase him to give him a smack, but I could never catch him, which was a bit of a drawback. I'd try and catch him.
I think I always took footy seriously. Our family was always involved with the Solomon Town Football Club, and I'd sort of grown up a fair bit there. So I really, as a kid, just wanted to play in the A-grade side there. So as a 15 and 16-year-old, I really trained hard and trained with men and the senior team, and was lucky enough to get a game at a relatively young age. I think I was 16 when I played my first game, and I've no doubt that playing against men at a young age really does improve your footy.
What's it like being coached by your father? Oh, it's not as bad as everyone makes out to be. It's all right. But is he a bit harder on you and David than he is on the other boys? No, I don't think so. I think he just treats us as one of the team.
I started when he was 18. He was under 18 and playing league, and he won the medal that year, which is feather in his cap. And he was easy to train because all he wanted to do was to play well and make a bit of a name for himself and get down to town and play league football, and that was the thing he wanted to do. And of course, one way of doing it was to league clubs to take notice, and of course he won the medal there in that year, and there was a few chased him after that.
We'd signed him up. He come down and had a chat, and he still had some commitments in Pirrie, but he'd been doing some training, and he came down. We had a big run. It's about a 12k run, which finished right at the top of Morford Road, which I don't know if you know the top of Morford. It's a very, very steep hill. And I remember Mark, I said to him before we started, "You all right with this?" He said, "I know, I'll handle this okay." Been doing a fair bit of work in Pirrie.
I actually, quite silly, the night before I had a few beers, and probably the next morning when I woke up I was a little bit dehydrated, didn't have any breakfast, drove straight to the training session at about 7 in the morning, and it was a stinking hot day, and halfway during the run there was the water station, and I picked the glass of water up because I was dying of thirst, and someone knocked it out of my hand, so I didn't really have any drinks. And so by the time we got to near the end of the run, it was up a pretty steep hill, and obviously I was badly dehydrated. I
was actually running at the back, and he just passed out. Bang, hit the curb and hit his head, the whole thing, so I ended up in the back of a car his first run. And
there's a funny story that goes with that as well. I was talking to David Steckel and David Kapler probably 6 or 7 years later, and just admiring the amount of time they've been at the club. They've both been there over 10 years, and the amount of players they'd seen come through. And David Kapler actually mentioned about some of the less talented players that had come through, and he brought up, and what about that guy that collapsed running up the hill at Morford Road? And I said, "Hey mate, that was me," and he didn't believe me, but it actually was me, and he actually said, "Oh, he thought we'd never ever see that guy again after that run," but he did.
Everyone called him Skip, and I said, "Well, why do they call you that?" And we were just sort of walking out in the oval, and he said, "Well, it's funny you ask." He said, "When I was a young kid, you know, it's just they always just called me Skip, and they probably always just thought that I was going to be a leader one day." And I just sort of burst out laughing, thinking, you know, he's kidding himself. And then I found out the real reason why they do call him Skip.
My version of why they call me Skippy or Skip. It actually started when I was in Port Pirrie, and it was under 10s, the mini league used to play then, and I was about 4 or 5, and I used to get kitted up ready to play every week, but the coach wouldn't put me on because I was too small, and Mum and Dad had spoken to him and said, "Look, don't let him play, he's a little bit too small." So I used to howl my eyes out after every game because I didn't get a run, and then the last game of the year, the last quarter, the last 5 minutes, the coach sort of must have got the better of him, me crying every week, and he let me go on. So I've gone on, and the ball's come straight to me, and I've got a kick.
He was so pleased with himself that he'd go, you know, skipping down the field, and it was quite funny. And you know, like he'd come off and we'd say, "Did you see me? I got a kick." And we said, "Yeah, and we saw you skipping too." He said, "Oh no, I wasn't skipping," but he always used to do it. He didn't realise he was doing it. He still, even to this day, doesn't really believe that he did. But As soon as he was pleased with himself, he does it. And we tell him now sometimes in the AFL, if he does anything and it's really good, I said, sometimes you even nearly skip in the AFL, and he's not very pleased.
I had this little fat Port Pirie kid on my heels all day, just belting me, and maybe at the end of the day he's shaking his hand and walking off with him, and you know, there was some talk that South may fold at the end of the year and just saying, look, you know, we'd love to have you at Glenelg if the situation ever arose.
I think Reedy asked me to play on him that day and see if I could tag him. It was probably one of the first tagging roles I'd had. I hadn't really done a lot of it, so it was an interesting experience. Chris had a fair bit to say, and Glenelg I think they won by 15 or 20 goals, and obviously Chris was a little bit frustrated because he wasn't having a huge day, and he was having a fair bit to say, so it was quite an interesting day, and it was an experience for me playing on probably the best part in the league at that stage and just watching how he went about his business.
I knew he was from Port Pirie, but didn't take much notice of him. Chris McDermott did. Chris McDermott, Glenelg captain, was tagged by Mark one particular day, and he just made the comment afterwards that he made it hard for him to get a kick, and that was probably the reason we put him on the list initially, the first list, because we didn't have that many guys from South Adelaide. He was young and he was a real goer.
I think the real turning point for Mark came in a final series, which was 1990. We were bottom mid-season, had a pretty good second half, scraped into the 5 and knocked off Norwood in a final, and then went on and got knocked out in the next game. But that second half of the season, Mark developed as the team developed, and his actual finals games were excellent. And I'm certain if we hadn't made the final, well, I wasn't for certain anything in footy, but I'd be reasonably confident to say if we hadn't made the finals and the 2 games that Mark played, I doubt whether he would have been picked up on this squad. As it was, he was one of the back-end squad members. I'd have some doubt that they would have had him in mind till they saw him play in 2 finals and play extremely well.
If you can understand the amount of training we were doing, we were training 13 out of 14 days. We had every second Sunday off. That's all we had off. And we were there at Footy Park every night and training as hard as we'd ever trained. And all of this was with no guarantee. There was, obviously there was probably 30 guys out there that did all the training and then missed out on a spot. So it was pretty hard work, and a lot of the time you just didn't really know if there was going to be anything on the end of it for you. So it was a real task, both physically and mentally, to keep yourself motivated to go on.
You know, we wanted to get as many young players on as we possibly could. We certainly had senior players on, but he was one from South Adelaide. We only had Nigel Smart from South Adelaide and Peter McIntyre. So we were looking for the extra spread of the player from South, and Chris had recommended him highly. So we put him on, not as an afterthought, but he was there without any, without any real thought that he'd have a great role in the club later on.
As the deadline got closer and closer, there was more and more guys not turning up to training or being called aside at the end of training and being told that thanks but no thanks, you weren't quite there. So I think it got to a night where you kept doing counts and counting how many blokes were there and how many blokes had gone, and you sort of realised about a week or so before they announced the list, there was actually only 42 guys left there. So at that stage it was really was a huge relief more than anything, because you'd done all this work and you just hated to think that perhaps you weren't going to be included. So it was a relief, and also a little bit of disbelief for me, because at the start I really didn't get my hopes up too high, because I didn't want to build myself up in case there was a fall coming. So the whole time through it I really didn't get my hopes up, and I kept telling myself, well, this will be a great preparation for the SANFL. If I don't get picked up for this team, at least I'll be doing the work and be preparing for a good season in the SANFL. So I really didn't have my hopes set too high, and then to be included was just fantastic. The extraordinary thing was I actually came in to replace Daryl Hart, and at that time Daryl Hart had been won all the media awards the year before. Been touted as probably had the best year out of all the players in the SANFL. So for me to replace him was amazing, first of all. Secondly, there were 6 guys who actually weren't contracted. They were on the list, but they didn't have an actual contract. So I think it was on the Wednesday night, Neil Curley rang me or spoke to me and said, look, you're going to be playing this weekend. This is before selection obviously, and he said, look, you're going to be playing, you have to come down and sign a contract so that we can lodge it and we can get it into the AFL in time so you can play. So you just go down there, and I was just walking on air for the first, all of Wednesday. Obviously I couldn't tell anyone because there was no selection at that stage. So it was just a really uplifting feeling that, you know, you're actually going to be making your AFL debut. And like I say, 6 months previous I hadn't dreamed that I'd be doing it. Then in that short space of time I was actually about to realise one of my dreams. And yeah, so you race in there and you agree to the contract, and I'm sure every bloke would have signed whatever was there. So yeah, you did that, and then it was, the hardest part was just not telling anyone. And I think I rang Mum and Dad and told them, and yeah, so that would have been a task for Mum not to tell anyone.
And I can only remember that everybody knew by the time I knew, so if he told me it was supposed to be a secret, I don't think that happened.
We were a very good attacking side, there was no doubt about that. Our defensive capabilities weren't quite so good, particularly in the midfield. And Mark had that ability. He wasn't a naturally instinctive attacking player, but he knew how to defend, he knew how to make it hard for his opponent to get a kick, and that was the quality we liked in him.
It was the first away game we played in Melbourne, and we played at Windy Hill, which is a pretty daunting task for anyone. And we got there, and Sheedy had taken all the flags down, so we didn't know, and there was a very swirly breeze, so that was the first thing we noticed. We had to change in the same rooms as the reserves team. I think it was Geelong or the Western Bulldogs were playing beforehand, so there was no hooks. All their reserves teams had taken all the lockers and the hooks up, so guys were sort of getting undressed and putting their stuff in their bags. It was very unorganised. Then I started on the bench, and we ran out there, and I actually had my tracksuit top on, so people couldn't see what number I was. And we ran to the bench, and people were already yelling abuse at me, you know, saying, you know, good Bickley and all this sort of stuff. And I just then realised how knowledgeable the Victorian supporters were, because I've never been to Melbourne before, and they actually knew who I was by sight without even looking at my number. So I was absolutely staggered that anyone sort of knew my name, never alone was abusing me. So it was quite a daunting start. And then we were very disorganised early, and I think Chris McDermott came off for me to come on.
Although they're getting plenty of the ball, they can't capitalise the Crows. Essendon looking good. That was Bickley. McGuinness battling hard. Izard shuffles it out. The quick kick was by O'Donnell to half forward. Manning, good use of the body, then caught with it. Umpire calling play on. Bickley again, receiving from Lee. Now to half forward. And a good mark by McIntyre. That's what they need. Well done by Ridley, and then eventually a hurry kick comes out to Manning. He's caught with the ball, and the Crows will get away through Denny Hughes. He's looking for Bickley. Now Bickley's got it. Not the way he moves, young Bickley. Bickley to the half-forward line.
He got his chance the fourth game in, and we were just so, it was unbelievable, you know, like everybody was ringing up, and cards and telegrams, and it was very exciting. The only thing was we couldn't be over there to see him, but we were glued to the telly and we watched him, and we were just so proud.
Scott Lee goes to the defensive side, then on to Lindsay. There should be a mark coming up to Bickley, and it is a good mark.
Yeah, it was just a really tough game, and we got done by 8 or 10 goals, and yeah, I just remember being pretty forlorn afterwards, and sort of thinking, gee, this is going to be hard work, because you know, going to all these suburban grounds and playing against these teams that have had 100 years history, it was certainly pretty tough.
He's the quiet, shy country boy. He was an apprentice electrician at Mitsubishi. He was very fortunate in as much that Chris McDermott really took him under his wing and really helped develop him, always pushed his case and gave him confidence, and I think that was a tremendous influence on the young fella. And he just slowly bloomed and blossomed.
McDermott did well, then McCarthy again. Rock hasn't seen much of the ball so far. Bickley, well done. Tasker, Wren couldn't control it. Slapped out eventually. Bickley over the ball cleverly. Tregenza, the speedster's away, runs through centre, kicks towards half forward. Jamison again.
It might end up with Klug here. No, Michael Martin was in after it. Oh, still a chance for Adelaide. Is kicking in with Bickley. And he's kicked another one for the Crows.
I think his fitness improved immensely. And Mark, with the sort of player he is, where he does a lot of the hard things, he does a lot of tackling, a lot of chasing, a lot of blocking, smothering, etc. It can be very, very taxing on your body. And I think his fitness improved immensely on that. He also did probably over-bulked up a bit. I think most of the Crows over-bulked in those early years. And I think since Malcolm's been there, you know, we've taken the emphasis off that for him to try and get him back a bit more running. But I think his fitness and a little bit extra strength enabled him to do all those things I talked about, and they really did stick out because, quite frankly, there weren't many people in Adelaide Footy Club that paid a lot of attention to those factors of the game. So Mark stood out, I think, in that area.
It was an exciting time. It was a time when we didn't really know what to expect, and mine personally was, we're playing for the LA Football Club, that we weren't expected to win many games, certainly not many away games, and it was a step up, a lot more fitness work, a lot more harder work on the track, and the game was very, very quick. But I think Mark and I both enjoyed the challenge of coming up, and certainly Mark slotted in nicely into a midfield role where he had guys like Dermot and McGuinness and Mark Micken as a formation of a new club. Mark just seemed to probably just milled in quite nicely, not take much of a role, but just learn from these new senior players, and I think he learned a hell of a lot.
After every game he played on the Graham Coolins, he would give you a report on the game, and it just tells you, how many kicks and handballs you had, how many of them were effective, things like tackles and smothers. When we went away on a trip, he just asked for us to set our goals, and I think some of the questions are the ultimate goal that the team has, how we work towards those goals, how can we achieve our team goals, and just down the bottom it asks for improvements or initiatives that would or suggestions that may improve the overall preparation and performance of the team.
And what to say?
This is quite interesting, isn't it? It's been a couple of years since I've seen this. I said, I think we need to be a bit more aggressive and have a few more players who are prepared to get hurt for their teammates. Once this happens, I think it tends to snowball throughout the whole team, creating a do-anything-for-my-teammate approach, which undoubtedly brings the team closer together and builds a respect between one player to the other. There you go.
You set team goals, you set individual goals for players, but the ones that are most important are the players that set for themselves. And it's interesting looking back at some of the goals that Mark set. The first one, he just wanted to play for South Australia. Then he wanted to establish himself as a Crows player. And then early in the piece there's one where he says to win an AFL premiership. And I just thought, well, how prophetic is that? I mean, we all want to win AFL premierships, but he thought about it, committed it to paper, and obviously had it embedded in his subconscious. And the goals that you set for yourself and follow yourself are generally the most motivational.
Chance now for Todd Viney. Oh, desperate stuff by Bickley. Brilliant, Mark Bickely. Maynard and Adelaide get out of trouble.
Adelaide, they'll battle away. They're trying very hard. Here's Gowers and Ingerson. Gowers thumps it away. A loose ball. This is Bickley. McGuinness, the danger man. Bickley again. Set sail for home, Mark Bickely. And don't tell me he's kicked it. Yes, he has.
Marshall takes the mark. Into McDermott. Another bomb to the forward line. From behind. Oh, Bickley!
Smart's got it. Goes to ground. Steve Hocking belted down by Bickley. Whew.
That was a fantastic bit of play, wasn't it? Bickley dispossessed Hocking.
I think it became pretty apparent within his second year and third year that he had that talent, and it was just a matter of nurturing it. Again, making sure his footy was good enough, which it was always going to be, and just letting himself develop naturally. And I mean, from probably '93, it was apparent that he was going to captain the footy club at some stage.
In his early days, he was probably more by example than what he said, because we had so many guys around, like Chris McDermott's, Tony McGuinness's, Andrew Jarman's, people like that, who were the more senior and the captains, of course, and used to lead by what they did, but also what they said. Whereas Mark, probably the way he played the game, was just hard at the footy. He used to do the little 1%ers, the smothers, the tackles, all that sort of stuff. So from that point of view, probably he showed leadership qualities, and I think he'd always been one to be pretty close with the coaches, no matter what. He used to, I think, Cornsey used to give prizes out on a Friday night meeting before our games, if whoever could tell him a bit about the team we were playing, and he'd pose a question and Mark's hand always used to go up and he'd get a cherry ripe for it all the time, so he was always wanted to be pretty close to the coaches.
Well, I actually got reported an incident which was unbelievable. It shouldn't have even been reported, and I got suspended for a game, and a little freckly, skinny, red-headed bloke who was about 16 at the time had been training with us a little bit and had shown some good form in the SANFL, and he came into the team and his name was Ben Hart.
Don't know about the skinny, freckly part, but anyway, yeah, it was. I was on the list in '91, didn't play. Come to '92, did the whole pre-season with the club, and was playing back at North Adelaide at the time when the boys were playing. I think it was then the Ansett Cup, or I don't think it was the Ansett Cup, but the pre-season competition. And Mark got reported for an incident. I can't exactly remember what it was, but in the end ended up getting rubbed out for a week, which gave me my chance to come in. I think I was 17 at the time, so I got a chance to actually come in and played in that game, and touch wood, you know, I've been pretty lucky to have stayed in ever since, so I think I owe my bit of my career to Mark for that, yeah.
Does he remind you of it often?
Oh, it comes up every now and again, yeah. He sort of, you know, if it wasn't for me, he wouldn't be here, that type of stuff. But, oh no, I think it was good for me to get a chance, and it just happened to Mark. You know, I suppose he keeps telling me that he actually paved the way, did it on purpose, but I don't know about that.
He's always telling me how vain I am and these sorts of things, but yeah, he doesn't seem too embarrassed about being white. I know he likes to think he's quite an attractive guy. He thinks he looks like a guy off 90210. There's a guy in there, I can't even think of his name, he's the musician, and he's always telling people he's been told he looks like that guy, and just quietly he's pretty confident in himself.
Yes, he's a little bit vain in terms of his rear end, and I think he works very, very hard at trying to just keep that in shape, and he gets a lot of grief from a lot of players about it.
I think a few of the boys used to get into it, or probably still do, about the size of his bum actually, how big it is. That's probably why he can't run as well.
He takes it in stride. A couple of times they go, it's not that big, is it? No, Mark's not big.
He's no great suntanner, he's not a beach bunny or anything like that, but he found a way to get through pre-season, and he hasn't got an athlete's body. I mean, the game now is built so much around being athletic and, you know, being 6 foot and being able to run 10Ks in, you know, 45 minutes or something or other, and his body's not really designed for that, and he's probably one of the dinosaurs of the game that maybe they're slowly working out of the game, but he's managed to transform his body and work on his body so that he could compete in the new game, and that's a real credit to him.
Goes on the rampage at Football Park, up towards Smart. He's had a terrific match. Beautifully done to Bickley, right on 50, that'll be close to a goal! Oh, what a ripper!
Attacking is Begovic, but Lee gets the hand pass. Bickley's running support. 50 metres from goal, Bickley goes, and Bickley may have kicked a goal. A terrific kick by Mark Bickely.
Anderson to Smart, to Bickley, who's kicked 3 and now has kicked 4.
There's a margin of about 4 or 5 won't be impossible, and they're playing inspired football at the moment. McDermott to Bickley, who heads for home, and I think it's good. It's a goal.
We just kicked enormous scores, and our midfield, because of the way we played a high possession game, we all had a lot of touches, and I think there's a couple of games in a row where I had around 40 odd possessions, which is certainly wouldn't have it these days. We play a lot less possession game, and I'm not sure if all those were necessary or effective, but yeah, there was a period there we went through where all the midfield, because we were winning by so much, had huge possessions, and yeah, it was certainly interesting, and obviously Tony Modger up forward was giving us something to aim at, and he was kicking lots and lots of goals.
As Ellison crept up, was it Stevens on the mark as he crept up a yard or so?
Gives it his best.
Modric! That is the mark of the year. I'll say now, no one will beat that.
Well, 45,000 people have risen to one. It's one of the great moments in the game, isn't it? It really is.
Tony Modric, probably the most spectacular player I've played when I've been lucky enough to see him take most of his high flyers, and also a memorable moment was when he did kick his 100th goal against Fitzroy, and the crowd invaded the pitch. You know, there was a couple of guys that tried to get around and protect him, and it was bedlam there for a while.
Goal number 100 for the season. He kicks. I think he's got it. Well done, Anthony Modra. Great effort by the champion football. Here they come. Modra getting mobbed. And we can only hope from the Crows' point of view he doesn't get injured, because this could be pretty dangerous, really. The sentiment's right, but really, I suppose you could think his lucky stars is here and not over in Football Park, because there would you be 45,000 of those fans. I think it's a shame it's not a football park.
I think it was the biggest crowd that's been at Footy Park since our inception, and it was certainly a big day for us. And you know, Collingwood were a pretty fearsome side at that stage, and have been going reasonably well. I remember Collingwood being in front, and then I remember Tony McGuinness kicking an inspirational goal sort of midway through the second term, and that really got us going. I think Tony Modra threw a couple of marks after that. And I think we got back, I think after being 6 goals down during the second quarter, we got back to, you know, being around square, and then in the last quarter we skipped away a little bit. And one of the vivid memories that I do have is that with about 5 minutes to go, there was this big chant that went up that started saying, you know, we're in the finals. And it was, you don't often take time out on the field to listen to what the crowd's saying, but at that stage it got so loud, and they were saying we're in the finals, and it really started to sink in, and it was a pretty amazing feeling. And probably after 91 and 92, we'd hope that we'd be able to take the next step and play in the finals, and yeah, to actually, once again, to realise that dream of being able to go to the MCG the week after and play in the finals, it was certainly a very exciting period. It was probably at the top of the hype with the Crows. Like there was such hype when it came in, and then it sort of died down a little bit by late 92. Then once the team started playing well, everyone got involved. The state was very buoyant. And yeah, it was really, you know, all going into uncharted territory basically. And the first final against Hawthorn had been a powerhouse for so long and had, you know, a lot of great players, the Dunstals and the Plattons and these guys, and hadn't missed the finals for, you know, 12 or 13 years or whatever the record was. And so many people travelled across, and we just remember getting there and just running under the oval and seeing how much support was there. It was just, it was amazing. And a lot of people didn't give us a lot of hope playing against such a seasoned side like Hawthorn, and for us being our first final. And yeah, we really played, you know, a really hard, tough brand of footy, and it was a close game. We were actually able to nut it out, and a lot of people thought that if the game was close and tight towards the end, that Hawthorn, with their experience, would come away. But to the guys' credit, they held in there, and we had a win. And it was just the emotion and exuberance after that was sensational.
McGuinness is there. It bounces for a goal. Gowers takes the mark. There's the shot. The Crows, with their own bit of history, have knocked off the mighty Hawks. And in their first attempt at AFL finals, they've advanced to the second semi.
We always gave him jobs to do. There's nothing specific that comes to mind. I mean, sometimes we gave him jobs that were too big. The only problem was with him with the tagging role is he had such an instinct to get the ball that the player and the guy was tagging would hang off. That's the only problem. You know, his endeavour and instinct was to get the ball rather than to restrict an opponent. So, you know, the worst example of that was the game, the final against Carlton at Waverley, where he was on Bradley, and you know, Mark goes at the ball, Bradley hangs back, the ball comes, Bradley kicked 3 goals in like 5 minutes and just destroyed the game. I mean, that was about the margin we lost by, but you can't fault Mark because of that, because he's taking the ball.
I actually think I might have started on him, and yeah, he obviously he's been a great player and still is for that matter at this stage, and yeah, he just had one of his better days and probably cut me up a little bit.
Well, what a turn-up this is. It's not over yet. There's a long way to go. But at half-time, it's 6-6 to 12-12. We wouldn't read about it. I kid you not, they were betting 4-1 on Essendon this morning. And if this was a scoreline at half-time, we'd no betting if they were in front. It should never be though, Bruce, because I always believe if you've got 20 committed people on any given day in a game of Australian rules football, as long as you've got them committed, you're going to have a really good contest.
It's just one of those games where it's just happening, and every goal they kick, they're getting closer, and you can see they've got more spring in their step, and I think they had a team that had some really good leaders in it. One guy especially, Bomber Thompson, was instrumental in getting him back into the game. I thought his voice and the way he was directing guys, sort of, early in the third quarter when they were down by a fair bit still, and it was obvious that he'd been through some finals campaigns and he knew what was on the end of it. And he certainly drove a lot of their guys to run harder and to work harder, and that's perhaps the experience that we didn't have. We hadn't had too many guys who had played a huge amount of footy or grand final, so we perhaps didn't know what the prize was on the end of it.
It's been one of the most remarkable games in the long history of this great game. To be 7 goals behind at half-time.
You learn so much more from your disappointments and your setbacks, and I think growing and maturing is always a process of learning, making mistakes, having some successes, and then getting kicked in the backside and picking yourself up and doing it again. If you're good enough to pick yourself up, you emerge a much stronger person from it. If you're going to lie down there and complain and just let the world walk all over you, well, it's, you stay there. Mark was always very good, and then there's a nucleus of Crows players who were there from day one, who saw the adulation, the sheer adulation, which wasn't really deserved, had the real setbacks and the bitter disappointments, but at the same time learnt from it and emerged stronger. Now he is at the forefront of that group.
I had missed the game through injury up until that time, and had a really good start to the year. I think most of the club did. I think Modge took 13 in the first game against Carlton, and then we'd gone reasonably well, and then I think it was round 4 we played Footscray, and just went to change direction in the middle of the ground, and I just felt a crunch, and I couldn't put my foot on the ground again. I'd broken a bone in my foot, so that was pretty disappointing for myself, and plaster for 6 weeks and then a couple more weeks to rehabilitate. So it was, I think I ended up missing 8 or 10 games. So it was certainly a sobering time for me, and it was a different time because I'd never been out of the game injured, even from when I'd been playing, A grade in the country at 16. From 16 to that day, I hadn't missed a game through injury, I didn't think. So to be out for 6 or 10 weeks and watching was certainly very difficult for the first time.
He was horrible for the first probably 2 weeks. So moody, of course, wanting to get out there. But then he learned how to take advantage of it, with the leg up and waiting on him hand and foot type thing, and he got away with a lot.
Now joining us in the studio, senior Crows player Mark Bickely. And Mark, were you surprised by the Corn sacking?
Oh yes, Graham, I was a little bit surprised. I think the board looked into it long and hard, and I suppose they're the ones that matter, and they saw fit to do it.
Is it true, as Max suggested, that Corns had lost the confidence of the players?
I'm not so sure they lost the confidence. I just think that in the end they just weren't responding as well as what they had in previous years, and I suppose the board looked at that and thought that perhaps someone new in the position might be able to get the players to respond better.
What do you know about Robert Shaw as a coach?
Not much, actually. I know that from what I can hear from Melbourne, he's a pretty good bloke, and we'll just have to wait and see. He hasn't been appointed yet, so we'll just see how it goes.
At 7:30 last night, Robert Shaw arrived in Adelaide for the second time in 4 days. This time he was to be told the plum job of coaching the Crows was his. This morning at the Lakes Hotel, Shaw met with Captain Chris McDermott, Tony McGuinness and Mark Bickely for breakfast. Then it was off to the Crows' offices to be introduced to the staff members. Flanked by Chairman Bob Hammond, Shaw's choice as assistant coach Michael Taylor, and senior players, he controlled his first media conference as coach of the Adelaide Football Club.
Wrapped was an early feeling I had, but that's been sort of tempered somewhat by the challenge, as you said, that I have got, and I'm very mindful of the expectations of the people in South Australia. I'm also very mindful of the expectations of myself, and it'll be a terrific job to be involved in, obviously, but I'm here to win. I'm here to be successful, and I'm here to hopefully complement the organisation that's already in place here at Adelaide.
We had nothing but respect for Robert and for what he's done and for the way the Fitzroy Football Club approached football, and if we can approach the game in the same manner that they did, then I'm sure we'll be successful.
I believe a lot of mutual respect, not only for the Adelaide people and the Fitzroy Football Club, but for myself and people like McDermott and McGuinness and that. We've had some tremendous battles over the last 4 years. They certainly know the way I go about my football, and I also are very, very complimentary of the way they play their football.
Yeah, it was certainly very different. I think what had happened, the club, after the fallout with Graham Collins, that they wanted someone who could bring that Melbourne mentality. I think they looked at Michael Malthouse and what he'd done for the West Coast Eagles, and they thought, you know, if we can get someone with this Victorian attitude, you know, tough, hard footy. We hadn't won any games in Melbourne on the road for a long time, so they really wanted to get someone from over there who could inject some sort of toughness and life into the club, and you know, he did that in a lot of ways. How can I put it? He certainly brought an us against them type attitude to the club, and you know, we tried a lot of different things, and he introduced a lot of new players to the club, and I think that's probably one area where people don't give Robert Shaw and his group of people the credit that they deserve as far as the players they actually brought to the club and recruited. You know, you look now at the Tyson Edwardses and the Andrew McLeods and Peter Cave and Kane Johnson and Simon Goodwin type players. All of them were recruited while Robert was at the club. So he did develop a couple of players, but at the same time we really never got any continuity going. We were unable to really settle and formulate on a set style of play that we could continue to use from week to week, and that was a bit of a downside for us, where we tended to win one, lose one, win one, lose one. We could never string, you know, 4 or 5 games together, and yeah, and when you do that, you certainly lose a bit of confidence, and we certainly didn't play confidently under Robert Shaw.
It seems the only 2 people safe at Crowland are Chairman Bob Hammond and CEO Bill Sanders. They secured Blight and they'll remain untouchable. After that, it's anyone's guess. Malcolm Blight has a clear direction as what has to happen to improve this outfit.
There's got to be some changes made. Now, in probably most areas of the club. Now that's not something that I'm intimately aware of. I can certainly tell you from a playing point of view and a structure of the football team, that'll change.
And it's not just fine-tuning, there's plenty of changes in the weeks ahead.
I think if you run 11th, 11th and 12th, you're a dill to say that it doesn't need an accident in some parts.
In his mind, what's been wrong with Adelaide's setup in previous years?
There's a whole host of things, including players, and they will cop the brunt of what's happened at the Adelaide Football Club for the last 3 years while I'm involved. Once we settle that list down, then we work with them.
Malcolm Blight finally came face to face with the 42 players he's chosen to carry the club's fortunes into 1997. A get-to-know each other chat that lasted for more than 3 hours, but if the Crows had thought they'd gotten rid of one teacher, they could be forgiven for thinking they'd gained another.
It was all very basic. It's just more setting out some guidelines of which he expects us to work by. I think Malcolm is a pretty attacking coach, and it's probably one area of our game that, you know, looking on last year, we need to improve is to kick more goals, so to speak. So, you know, I'm sure that's one area we will improve.
New players, training staff and a new coach give rise to a new optimism.
Are you going to make the finals this time or what? Oh, well, you know, if we don't, we're in big strife, I think.
I was sitting next to Mark Rashido, and he actually laid down all his beliefs in footy and his team rules and the things we were going to do and the things we weren't going to do. And that's a couple of the rules where one was you weren't allowed to dive on the footy, and another one was you weren't allowed to bump. And Mark Rashido looked at each other and myself looked at each other and thought, well, we're not going to go far here, because all we had been doing the last couple of years was diving on it and bumping blokes. So we certainly had to change our philosophies a little.
There's one comment that probably Malcolm made during that, and it's either my way or the highway, and he made it perfectly clear that if you didn't want to do it his way, then the door's open and you can go. And certainly none of the guys went through that door. He made some structural changes to the club. He made changes to the administration, the setup. and he was getting his footings right, so there would be strength within the club over a period of time. And certainly one of those changes was, okay, Mark Bickely as captain, that if we were going to change our game plan, the way the players would play and commit, he needed a captain that would help those changes along.
He wanted the job, that was the important thing about it, and I guess because he'd had quite a bit of experience and he knew what it entailed because of Chris and McDermott and Tony McGuinness beforehand, who he was very, very friendly with.
I think it would have been a lot tougher for him had we still been there, because he may have felt a little bit uncomfortable, and I think what Malcolm did was fantastic for Mark and fantastic for the footy club, that he had a definite direction he wanted the club to go, and as tough as some of those decisions were to make, he made them quick and clean, which is the only way to make them. And I mean, the results are obvious to everybody how successful that was, and I think that transition and that cleaning of the closet made it so much easier for the Bickleys and the Rashudos and the Smarts and the Wrens, who were the heirs apparent and people just ready to take the next level, but maybe a little hesitant to do so whilst we were there, just automatically step up. And the development of them as leaders and the way you hear them speak and conduct themselves in public is just a real credit to them, and a credit to Blight's intuition to hand them the reins.
I think it's evolved more with Mark. Certainly at South Adelaide in the early years of the Crows, I don't think Mark was a natural leader. I don't think there were too many natural leaders at the club. Certainly McDermott and McGuinness and Co and Andrew Jarman, they were the leaders, and certainly they led by example and showed the others what to do in regards to AFL footy. And I think Mark has just learnt the art of leadership. Simple as that.
Certainly I think he's probably moulded himself a little bit on Chris McDermott, the way Chris used to captain the club, being a type of bloke who would talk to everyone. So I think maybe a little bit there, but he's certainly got his own way of doing it as well. He's certainly very much an on-field leader as well as being off the field.
Big shoes to fill, and he's filled them very well. I mean, he hasn't filled them by, I suppose, being the star of the footy side, but I think he's filled them by his whole approach to the footy club. The way he handles himself off the ground, the way he handles himself with the media, the way he handles himself on the ground, I think it's a pretty complete package. Probably nearly as complete as you're going to get. I look at someone like Carey, who's captain of North Melbourne, who gets a big start because he's, such a great player. I think he's starting to get better off ground and handling himself a lot better. Mark, I think, taken to all round package a bit better than most that I've known.
There's always a thought from players that you don't want to get too close to the coach, and probably vice versa from the coach's point of view. The coach doesn't want to get too close to the players, because there are times during the year and periods that the coach and the player come head to head, and it's a tricky situation, but Malcolm does it very well, and Mark seems to communicate and respond very well to Malcolm Blight, and I think they have a good working relationship.
We weren't really in the game, and you come in at half time, and it's such an important game when there's so much on the end of it, and Malcolm just asked a couple of players for a special effort. Myself and Sean Wren and a couple of the senior guys who once again hadn't been playing that well, and Rennie especially was probably one of the big turning points in the game. He really did start to get on top in that ruck roll in the middle. And
Scotty West is going to have to work awfully hard at the bottom of the pack. Wren had it and almost threw it away. A chance for Nigel Smart. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw McLeod. McLeod snapped for 40 metres, and the Crows again hang on.
It was almost as if the roles had been totally reversed from 93. They had this lead that they were trying to protect and couldn't really sink the knockout punch. They had a few shots at goal and missed, and we were just coming from behind, and Jarman was amazing up forward, took some marks and kicked some real pressure goals, and once you get closer and closer, that momentum builds, and once we hit the front, it was just an amazing feeling.
Jamison goes short, he finds Hart, he's kicked 5 behinds, but he's been a mighty player. Kicks the ball out wide, it's a one-on-one duel, it's a free kick there to Bickley for mine, and he's got it. He was held on to.
they've just in fact, it's Goodwin. They're starting to win the one-on-one battles, KB.
So Goodwin's got it on centre wing. Goes short. Finds Johnson. He's got it, Jarman! Mr. Magic's got it, Darren Jarman. The spotlight is on him. 35 metres out. The Crows are in front.
When the siren blew, and the euphoria after the siren in the Western Bulldogs game was probably equal, if not more, than what it was after the final siren in the grand final the week after. It was just an amazing feeling to think that we had actually won from this almost impossible position, and that we were on our way to a grand final. And most of us had always hoped and dreamed of playing in a grand final, but when you actually, it's there and it's in front of you, and you realise the dream, it's a very emotional and amazing feeling.
First grand final, I'd have to say that was the most exciting, especially the Bulldogs game. I was in and out the house, couldn't sit and watch it. I ended up getting a nervous rash that lasted a week, disappeared just after the grand final, but it was the most brilliant day. I had to be up about 5 o'clock in the morning. With all the partners flew out in the morning, and we met up with the guys before the game, and I remember Mark was walking around in the park just taking it easy, and a few of them were looking a bit nervous. He was certainly looking nervous when I caught up with him later, but very, very exciting. So nothing could ever compare with it, not even the second one. Sort of a totally different feeling, but the first grand final, that was really special.
Well, the coin toss is an interesting one actually, because we got out there to toss the coin, and they have these special coins minted, and the umpire shows you the coin, and on one side it had, I think, Coca-Cola were the major sponsor. It had a Coke logo on one side, on the other side it had the Great Southern Stand. And so it was my call, and I call heads most times, and so he's tossed it up and I've called heads, and it's come down and it's landed on the Great Southern Stand side. And the umpires looked at it and he said, well, it's not a head, which way do you want to go? To Nathan Burke and Stu Lowe. And they've sort of pointed with the breeze and sort of jogged off, and I was sort of a little bit miffed because there was no head on the coin, and the umpire didn't say which side was heads and which side was tails. So, you know, we were never going to win the toss, so we're just lucky there probably wasn't a 10-goal breeze that day.
Feeds it wide, great Kevin off the ball. Got some space for Allen alongside the centre circle. Unloads, Smart from behind, up the goal, 5 to the half. Jarman
gets to Connell. Connell inside 50. Belts it towards full forward. Jarman there. With him was Zilla. Jarman again. Round the body. That'll do. Oh, that will do.
Up he goes to Goodwin. In towards centre half forward. Towards Nigel Smart. Bounces straight up. Leaves the pass to Ron. Oh, they're hammer home. Look at them go.
So there's nothing left now but to celebrate.
It was just an extraordinary feeling. Yeah, and if you notice there, Malcolm Blight sort of uses his wrong hand and puts his hand across his face, and I remember speaking to him. I think he had to do a photo shoot or something somewhere, and I said to Blighty, I'm meaning to ask you, why did you use your right hand to lift the cup up instead of your left hand? He said, oh, there's a reason for that. And I said, okay, what was it? He said, well, I've never been there before. And to hear that from a guy who'd done most things in footy was just it brought a smile to my face.
Max and I sort of talked about it beforehand, and I said, you know, what would happen if we won and Mark holds that cup up? I said, do you realise the significance of that? And he said, yeah, it'll be wonderful, won't it? And then when it did happen, it was very emotional. I cried like I am now. And no, it was beautiful.
It was the first time I have ever cried at a football game. I used to think it was ridiculous watching people cry, so it's only a game, you know, it's not that big a deal. I was never a real football person, but yeah, to see someone achieve their ultimate goal in life, you don't know many people that can do that. So it was a very emotional time watching him up there. It was good.
I guess there's not a prouder guy in Australia than you are tonight.
It's just an amazing feeling, and it's such a pleasure for me to be able to lead that team. And I didn't have a huge day, but you look at the other guys, and the young guys especially, really stood up, and just so happy for them. The club as a whole, I think, has shown so much character. I think only our supporters believed at the start of the finals that we could actually do it, and each week we grew and grew. And then today, under the pump again at half-time, we just came out, stood up like hardly any other team has ever done before.
Yeah, there was a bit of envy, and it took a little while to get over that, but now it's just I get such enjoyment out of seeing them play and seeing them develop and seeing them enjoy themselves, and just knowing that maybe you're a part of that in a small way in developing the footy club, and now it's successful. You can sit back and enjoy their good times, even though you're not playing. I get so much enjoyment out of watching them play and seeing the improvement in them. But yeah, there were some tough times, but they're forgotten pretty quick, and life goes on. And look, I just couldn't have been happier with the involvement I had with that footy club and with my footy career. So, I've been able to leave with no regrets, and that's the most important thing, I think.
No superstitions. Very quiet, keeps to himself, but he doesn't really get much of a chance to think about the footy. We've got the kids running around, and I'm nagging off in the corner, and it's all fairly relaxed. Try and keep it as normal as possible.
Cuddle. What about around here? Oh, big cuddle.
Oh, that's nice, wasn't it? It probably it just changed your perspective a little bit. I think certainly when you have children and a family, you realise that football is not the be all and end all, and it really does work in your favour a lot of times. The amount of times that you lose or you play poorly, and you come home and you're greeted by your wife and kids, and they don't really care if you've played well or you've lost. They don't understand at the age they're at. So you can really use it to forget about footy sometimes and just enjoy their company. And it's certainly been a real release for me.
He's terrible when the football's on. Might as well talk to a brick wall. It's always just watching. But he's good. Girls absolutely love him being home. Shane, our eldest, she really misses him, so she gets very excited. But he does help out occasionally. He's pretty good.
There's so much talk of premiership hangovers, and they can't do it again, and all that sort of stuff. It really did drive us to make sure that we could maintain the standard that we'd set. The Bulldogs obviously had these feelings that we denied them a shot at the premiership the year before, and I thought they'd come out and they'd be angry and hard and fierce, but we just got away to a bolter of a start, got in front, and once again we were just able to really finish them off, and it was just an amazing feeling, and it was totally different to the year before. The siren blew and we won, and we knew we were in another grand final there because the scores were so far apart. There wasn't the euphoria, there wasn't that sort of stuff, but at the same time there was just once again this determination that, yep, we're there again, and we've got another shot at it, and geez, wouldn't it be fantastic to do it? So
it's half time, but Malcolm, your team is in trouble. Deep trouble, with North Melbourne dominating in that second quarter.
I was not the loyal supporter. I was terrible. I said, they've blown it. They've given it away. And I remember, I think it was Daryl Hart's little girl, I think she turned around and said, no, they always come back in the second half. And I sort of thought, well, yeah, you're right.
Malcolm just reinforced to us the enormity of the situation, that if you don't give it everything, and if you don't go out there and have and improve in the second half, then it's going to be hard to live with yourself. You don't get this many opportunities in grand finals. You really have to make the most of them. And he made a heap of changes, and also just told us to just take more risks.
Irresistible since half-time. 16 scoring shots to 4. Bickley up towards the wing. The captain driving towards centre half forward. Wren, brilliantly done.
You thought the North Melbourne players looked tight. McKernan then against Wren just almost lost his balance from fatigue.
Short Jarman. Wren knocks it down. Bickley, Johnson, irresistible football. McLeod, penetrating kick inside the 50, spills back out towards the half-back line. McLeod back onto the ball, tries to sneak away. Plenty of options. Jarman, Vardy, 20 metres out, very sharp angle, but you can guess the result.
They've done what we thought was impossible. They've been to Perth, to Melbourne, to Sydney, to Melbourne, and they've come back. And they've scored!
I think his 98 grand final was probably one of his better football moments. The second half of the 98 final, he was a key player in us turning things around.
If you notice in 98 when I reached over to give him the cup, he sort of made out he was going to go with his right hand, but he certainly got it with his left that time, so it was good.
Certainly not the most talented player that's ever been around. In fact, I've coached many better players in regards to real football talent. But this fellow has had a desire and a want to be successful that very few that I've been associated with have had at the same level.
There's nothing overall that stands out about Mark other than the fact that when the ball's there to be got and it's on the ground, it's in the midfield and we need someone to go get the hard pill, Mark's in there and at it. And some of the hits that he's taken over that time I think have been tremendous for our club and quite a spectacle for the game.
I've always been an enormous G for Mark Bickely. It's very hard to fault him because even if he gets beaten in a game of football, his desperation and endeavour is always there. He never ever created a problem for a coach. Never ever, because you could tell him things and he would listen. You could be critical of his performance and he would listen and try to right it. I mean, he was just never ever a problem. If you had a team of Mark Bickleys, you might be predictable, but by gosh, you'd never get beaten for endeavour and intent.
As a player, I'd describe him as very hard working, tough, not too bad with his skills. You know, I don't want to give him a big head, but no, he's not too bad. Probably just a little bit better than me at this stage, and so he should be playing a bit longer. But no, I think you'd rate him as a hard, tough, physical, pretty well-skilled player.
He was always the boss. Well, we thought he was, you know, when he was always organising people, you know, they played games, you know, he was telling everybody who they were going to be. You're going to be in Chapel, you can be so-and-so. He was always an organiser, and, you know, he did it fairly well, and he's still fairly well organised.
I think he's lifted to another level that, as being captain, you have to play well, and you have to perform, because you've got to lead by example. And I think his work rate and achievements also have lifted. In things that he struggled with, probably that again, if you don't play well, it's hard to be captain, okay, because you're trying to get the team as a unit to perform at its best, and if you're not contributing as you would want to, I think that weighs heavily on anybody. And being captain, I think there are times over the last few years where Mark's had a bad game or two. All right, the pressure's been applied, certainly by himself and by the match committee. And I think I don't know what he would be thinking, but I think that would weigh heavily at times when his performance and on-field performance is just a little bit below where his expectations would be.
If I had my time over again, I wouldn't mind being a Mark Bickely. I think he's terrific. Young bloke and been a terrific career. And secondly, if he come home with one of my daughters, I'd be pretty proud to have him around the place. He's a fine young bloke. He's a fine example to I think all the guys that want to, maybe not as talented as a lot of people are in footy, but if you really want to go for it, you can achieve it. And I think Mark Bickely is nearly the perfect example of that.
Yeah, it hasn't really changed a great deal. I suppose it's still being pretty honest, still trying to win the ball. Still trying to make it difficult for my opponent to get it, and I think nowadays football has become a little bit more accountable. You know, as I mentioned back in the early days, there used to be a lot of players that run around and get 40 possessions a game. You know, we just don't do that anymore, and I think it's more of a one-on-one type thing now, where you're accountable for your man on the field, and if you can walk off the end of the day and you've beaten him, and you've helped do some things that have helped your teammates or you've done some stuff that's helped the team, then you know, you've done your job. And yeah, there's days where you have good days and it's great, but there's also days when you're not going to touch the ball 20 or 30 times, but you still have to be in there and you still have to chase hard and you still have to protect your teammate and all that sort of stuff. And I suppose, you know, hopefully, you know, that's the way I play the game.